Welcome everybody to my podcast, Big Little Small Talk. I'm Megan O'Hara-Sullivan and I love to talk, but I also love to listen. If you're new here, welcome. Thanks for joining me today. I hope you enjoy the episode. Welcome listeners to Big Little Small Talk. You're with me, Megan O'Hara-Sullivan on 4DDB, the community radio station. And we've got a terrific community member here today. Her name's Elaine Keiseker and she's the Darling Downs Division President of the Queensland Country Women's Association. And something really special has happened this year. In August, QCWA celebrated 100 years of serving the community. Welcome along to Big Little Small Talk, Elaine.
Thank you, Megan.
Now, the QCWA has got an amazing history, and we have, on the Darling Downs, Cambooya particularly, something really special happened 100 years ago. Can you take me through it?
At Cambooya, Ruth Fairfax lived at Marinya, a property at Cambooya, and she was the instigator of starting CWA in Queensland on the 11th of August 1922.
Can you tell me a little bit about Ruth Fairfax? Because when I read some things about her, she said that the Country Women's Association, not to be confused with Chicks with Attitude, that you do that because you put aside difficulties of position, wealth and pride, and branches meet together every month socially to discuss the affairs of their district and help to further its interests, trying to break down the barriers that have gradually arisen between people and do away with suspicion and fear of being belittled. And I love that quote because it seemed so egalitarian, I guess, that Ruth's intention was to have a group of people who, no matter what your background, you were there for a common purpose.
Yes, the isolation in the bush in those days was fairly extreme. Like, we have records of them travelling in a ute to go to a meeting at Charleville on dirt roads, all this sort of thing. And up north, you know, they travel miles and miles and might even stay overnight to be at a place for a meeting the next day. They'd probably have a couple of flat tyres on the way, all this sort of thing. Very primitive. But she could see the need for these isolated women to have companionship, and they needed help. Always, you know, how long ago that was. And she just saw the need and came to the rescue, I guess.
I want to talk about the work that QCWA does because I think there's something like 220 branches throughout the state, is that correct?
That's right, yes. And there's about 3,000 members. And the things we do, it's a broad scope of activities, and we're just a small part of Associated Countrywomen of the World. So we have all over the world, you know, we combine for an international conference every 3 years. And we've done things like put tanks in third world countries so they've got clean water, all that sort of thing. We've opened up a pharmacy in a third world country because they had no access to medical help. Those sort of things we do. We were, before COVID, we were sending kits was called Kits for Kids. And we do up boxes of papers and pencils and things for people that had no access to things that help them learn. But closer to home, we have got bursaries that we have to further education. We've actually got one here at our Highfields branch for 2 of the schools we give out every year. And we've got a Darling Downs dance bursary, so further education in dance.
So tell me about that. Can you think of some of the recipients that have received these bursaries, and where does the money come from for that?
Well, the branches finance those. And we had a member in Highfields, she's moved away. Cassie, she became a vet, and she was the daughter of people that were on a property in North Queensland, and she was living in Melbourne studying. And she said the fact that she had the bursary, she didn't have to go to her parents when they were suffering with drought and say, I need money for food. She had enough money to get herself by. So that's the sort of thing we do.
Right. And the real premise for the QCWA is helping the lives of women and children. Is that correct? Yeah. Tell me about the advocacy work that you do. So I know that you lobby governments. But I think one of the really fascinating things that I've heard is about the compulsory seatbelts. Do you know much about that?
That was one thing that we were instrumental in bringing in to the country. The shark nets, although that's a bit controversial at the moment.
Well, I did read that too, shark-proof bathing enclosures.
Yes.
What's the story behind that?
Well, a long time ago, the first shark death in Queensland, that was way back in the 1960s, I think I remember, and that prompted us to try and do something. We've also, with the farmers, we had a program called QCWA, and it was a book to teach farm safety to children, like with the quad bikes and those sort of things, the helmets when you rode a quad bike. Yeah, that sort of thing.
What about the white lines on the side of the roads? That was another thing that I'd heard about. Also the flashing speed signs at schools. That was something QCWA was involved in. And this one I found really fascinating, which was the audible signals at traffic lights for the visually impaired. So every time you go past one of those, QCWA had something to do with that as well.
Was instrumental in getting those things, yes.
Incredible. And of course the bursaries. Can you tell me about Erlen syndrome, the advocacy around that? That was something else that I'd read. And Q fever?
Every year we pick a medical condition that we support, and so that would have been one of the things that we did. Well, you know, every year was a different thing. Cancer Research 1985, Year of the Disabled, Prevent Blindness Foundation, the Hear and Say, when that first came out. We did that for a year, so there's a whole list. Every year we do something.
Right, in a medical. What about the country kitchens? What's that involve?
That's an amazing program. That's funded by the government for us to spread the word about healthy eating, healthy cooking in the state. And pretty well every branch should have a country kitchens coordinator. And we've been into schools. Our local Wendy Gordon, she's our coordinator for this division, and she has workshops for the migrants. And so she's teaching them how the Western way for healthy food. She's won the award for the Southern region as the best coordinator for Country Kitchen. It's a marvellous program, it really is.
Yeah, fantastic. What about the Ruth magazine? What does that involve?
That was instigated about 10 years ago. It's just had its 10th anniversary, and it's a lifestyle magazine for everyone. It has CWA references, but it's just a lifestyle magazine, and it has been very successful.
What about the Public Rural Crisis Fund?
Public Rural Crisis Fund is for people who are suffering drought or floods, all of those things, those natural disaster things, and we pay into that. We sort of donate money to that. That's held in state office, and people can apply for help if they need help through that. And there's only 2 people know who has applied and who gets it. We don't give money quite often. We might pay a grocery bill in their own town. Rather than sending goods out, it keeps the grocery store running. We might pay their school fees or buy school shoes, things like that.
Incredible, isn't it? And my last one, that what I found really fascinating as well, is that you partner with DV Connect. What's that involve?
Yes. Natalie Bugden is our DV Connect person in this Darling Downs division.
Could you just explain to the listeners what DV Connect is? What does it stand for?
It's the Domestic Violence Connection, and we do up bags of necessary items that they might have to walk away and leave without anything from their homes. So we do up a bag, and it usually has toothbrush, toothpaste, combs, things like that, shampoo, just basic things like that they need.
And do you physically, at your branch, do you make up these packs for people?
All of the branches are involved. They might make the bags, and then they might donate money, and Natalie will go out and buy things she needs, or they might buy things if they're out shopping and there's toothpaste on special or something. They'll buy a couple of extra ones and then donate it in.
Right, wonderful. At your branch, what's a typical sort of branch meeting like, or how many have you got in your branch? And you being the Darling Downs president of the division president, what sort of involvement for you? How how often are you doing QCWA work, I guess?
This year it's probably been 24 hours a day because of the damage from the storms to the... It's really tied me up. We've got 9 branches in the division. I'm in Highfields branch. There are 31 members there, and we have a great group of people. It just seemed to be a need for it. It's only 5 years old, 6 years old. And 1 month it'll be a morning meeting, and then we have a night meeting. So 1 month the main business will be in the morning, and the night will be a social group. The next month we swap it over. The night is the business and the day is social. They've got a little group that they meet. They take craft along, but it's more of a chat show, I think. Yes, and once a month, So it's a lovely group of people and it's going really well.
Would you find, Elaine, that most of those women are ex-rural women or people who just identify as being rural women?
No, a lot of them are. A lot of them have come here to retire. And some of them have even come from interstate, and happy here. So.
And do you find that they have been women, they were in their local branch wherever they came from, and that's why they've joined here? Or?
Not necessarily. We have a couple that came from out St George Bollin way, and they joined because they've been members out there for a long, long time, and that'd be a good way to meet people. But a lot of them just saw when it was advertised.
What's your age range? Are you at QCWA, are they attracting younger women now as well?
Our age ranges from about 25 to about 90.
Great. What are the topics of conversation?
Oh, anything and everything. We're non-political, non-sectarian, so anything except that.
Yes, okay. And if someone strays into that line of conversation, do they get a bit of a very polite rap over the knuckles?
No, you just change the subject mainly.
Change the subject.
Unless we're on the same wavelength, we might have a chat.
Keep going. I'll just remind the listeners that they're on 4DDB and we're in Big Little Small Talk with me, Megan O'Hara-Sullivan, and we're talking to Elaine Keiseker, who's the Darling Downs Division President of the Queensland Country Women's Association, who this year celebrated 100 years in Queensland. What did the celebrations look like? What did we do?
We are doing everything. They had a launch for the celebrations in February in Brisbane. Every branch was expected to do something. Of course, we're noted for scones, but not only scones. They had a sconversation. So most of the branches had one of those, and Oakey had a very successful one. I went out to that. I went incognito. I tried to. Yeah, we've all done that. And of course we've got our big conference in October here because it was the birthplace of CWA, so that will be attended by people from all over the state. That will be a big thing. We've got a big expo at that the few days before the conference, and that's at the Good Shed, so there will be all sorts of crafts, not just ladies sort of crafts, but lots of people, woodworking, all different things like that.
That sounds fascinating. I did want to ask you about the sconversation, which I think is very, very cute. So tell me, what does that involve? When did every branch have a sconversation?
What we were to do was to go around the businesses around the town that have helped us, and they were to supply the scones, and so we were to chat and swap scones. So It worked very well.
And do you sometimes feel a little bit frustrated that QCWA is kind of, equals scones, and when you have done all of this incredible other work, sort of people minimise it to scones?
CWA is the best kept secret in the state. We do so much and people are not aware. So it's good to let people know just how much at the moment. We have passed a motion at our Southern Region Conference for the new hospital that people are trying to get here, and so we are pushing the government to try and get that sped up to get it.
Right, so advocating to the state government about trying to get the new hospital built,
Yes.
Can you tell me, I'm jumping around a little bit here, but what's QCWA's involvement in the patient subsidy scheme?
we were responsible for getting subsidised travel for people coming in from the bush for medical help.
Toowoomba Service is such a big area that's such an important scheme for people to come down here and access medical help. You mentioned before, Elaine, about your rooms. Are your rooms still there in Margaret Street? What happens there? I know that there used to be a lady employed full time there, Jan. Are they still open or?
No, the canteen was closed, it must be 6 years ago. I guess when Grand Central, with all the new coffee shops and that opened, it just seemed to go downhill and we couldn't keep it open any longer.
Yes. I had a girlfriend when I was at university who used to live in the CWA accommodation at Spring Hill there. And who's that available to, and is it still going?
No, it's not. We used to have hostels for students who came from the bush, and they could stay in these hostels safely and further their education. We had them in the bush too, like if they were on a property and need to go into a primary school, might have been 60 kilometres away or more, and they used to stay at hostels, but we don't have that anymore.
Is it just too hard to sustain, I suppose, and too costly?
All the red tape,
insurance and things, I would imagine. Yeah. All right. Well, look, I think we've heard all about the incredible work that the QCWA does. What's your involvement? How did you become involved, Elaine? Right back when? Tell me
I was
about
in
that.
Tambo, Western Queensland. We'd moved there. My husband was on transfer. He was with Australia Post, and we'd come from Mount Isa to Tambo. And the Shire chairman's wife rang me and said, would I like to join? So in a small town, you think, well, that'd be a way of getting to know people. And that's where I joined, way back in 1972.
So you went along as a member, and then how did you sort of become someone where you're taking more executive positions?
It's been really the love of my life as far as having, an interest. But we stayed in Tambo for 4 years. I was not in the branch long, and suddenly I had a position.
Everyone took a step backwards, and there you were as the president of the Tambo branch.
We moved to Toowoomba. My son was tiny and he had problems, so we needed to be near medical help. And then I started work. Well, they had no night groups in those days, so until I sort of retired and we went to live in Roma. We had a property at Roma, and I rejoined out there in about 1990, and I've been in ever since. And I've just enjoyed being a member and gradually became branch president, and then division vice president, division secretary, division president, and from there I've had a wonderful time actually. From being division president, you become a councillor on state, and I was chosen to be a voting delegate for the CWA of Australia, and then I was chosen to go to England for the international conference. It's just been a wonderful time. And I was a state vice president for a while too. So now I'm back to being president again, which I didn't plan.
What are some of the things that you've learnt from your involvement in the CWA?
Honey catches the bee. And I always think, there's an old Indian saying, walk a mile in another man's moccasins before you judge. And so that's something that I try to think when things go wrong.
What sort of things go wrong?
Well,
in a CWA sense?
Well,
trying to organise a conference and a 100-year celebration.
This conference has been a big thing to organise, and you hit a brick wall every now and again, So, but we're getting there, and it'll be fine.
I can't imagine how great it's going to be for our town to have that conference here and all those visitors. And international visitors, you said?
We won't have many for this one, but yeah.
A few. Now, I have a few questions at the end of my interviews, Elaine, that I like to ask people, and you don't have to take them too seriously or give me a scripted answer, but it just sometimes makes you think about things in a slightly different way. So yours are, in 3 words, I am...
I'm a hard worker. I try to be fair to people, and I try to be a listener.
Ooh, I like that. Hard worker, fair, and a listener. I don't think you could get 3 better qualities actually than those 3, and particularly in your role with the QCWA. What about this? If I'm frightened of anything at all, it's...
I keep having a recurring dream that I'm going into an underground car park and the road gets narrower and narrower and I can't get out. And that's something that stayed with me. Every now and again it pops up. So I hate underground car parks.
Isn't that interesting? I wonder what the people who interpret dreams, I wonder what they'd say about that one.
Be interesting because I was 17 the first time I had it, and underground car parks weren't around even. But I just remember going in a red car, going down this, going round and round and round, and it got narrower and narrower. Yeah.
Oh, I'm getting the chills
Incredible.
now. It sounds very scary. If I could travel back in time, I'd set the controls for...
1950s.
Tell me about the 1950s.
That's when I grew up. Didn't have a care in the world. There weren't many wars around. You didn't hear of a murder every day. People were peaceful. You played around in the streets and at dark you went home sort of thing. It was a very relaxed time.
Particularly after the war, do you think people had a sense of feeling lucky that they had survived and sort of abandonment, I guess? Where was that you grew up?
In Toowoomba.
Right.
I was actually born in Laidley and Mum and Dad came up here when I was just a baby, and so I grew up here, and when I got married we moved.
Yeah.
Moved
You said
to
before,
Melbourne.
Elaine, that you were working. What type of work were you doing?
Oh, just office work.
And that would sort of put you in good stead to be in these executive roles, do you think, in the CWA?
Probably. I started work at Taylor's Removals. I used to work for Len and Fred Taylor, and then when I went to Melbourne I started work in... My husband got me a job in the post office, so I was working there. We came back to Toowoomba, like, as I said, in the 1970s, and I worked on the telephone exchange, and I transferred to Rome with Telstra, and I worked in the office out there.
Right. That would have been the PMG days. Is that right?
Oh, it was Australia Post by then.
Oh,
I think.
right. Sorry, I'm getting my
Yeah.
telecom.
PMG, I'm not sure when it changed, but...
Okay, right. Interesting. So the 1950s for you, Elaine. Yeah, Heavenly and Toowoomba. What about this one? The last time I looked in the mirror, I thought...
Gee, I'm getting like my mother.
Well, I did have someone once who said to me, it's bad enough when you look in the mirror and you see your mother, but when you see your grandmother, that's when it's time to start crying. So you think you're starting to look like your mother. What about this one? If I had to leave a body part to science, it would be...
Probably my brain. I just think the brain's a marvellous thing, and to work out all the stuff that you have to remember over the years, it's pretty amazing. So
Yes.
I don't think they'll ever be able to do brain transplants or make false ones like they make false hearts and things.
Very good answer, Elaine. If life has taught me one lesson, it's...
That's the one where I was saying walk a mile in another man's moccasins. Same sort of thing. You just have to be aware. You might meet someone and they might be cranky and upset, but you don't know what's going on in their life. Yeah.
Very good. Empathy. Can't teach... Well, hopefully you can teach someone empathy, but it's a beautiful skill. Empathy and humility, I think. Okay. The song that can't keep me off the dance floor.
Chicken dance. We used to go ballroom dancing in Roma every Friday night. They had a group out there and they used to have the dead balls and all that still, and it was lovely. But yes, the chicken dance.
Would they have been doing the chicken dance at the...
No.
No, I was thinking that's a relatively recent invention, isn't it, the chicken dance?
Yes. When Expo was on in 88, my husband and I sat in the German pavilion for a whole day, and every now and again the chicken dance was on, so we were up.
You'd get up
Good
and...
fun.
Great, good for you. All right, now it's a time in our lives, I guess, we don't get to see a monarch die. Well, I have never seen one, and I don't know that I'll ever see one again, maybe. But this week, of course, a week ago today, the Queen of 70 years died, and always, in my Big Little Small Talk segment, I always ask people who is their favourite royal, and it doesn't have to be an English person, it doesn't have to be a living person. So Elaine, who is your favourite royal?
Well, of course, the Queen was, she was an amazing one. But living, I think Anne, she works so hard and she doesn't look for accolades. She just gets on with the job, and, I just think she's a really hard-working, genuine person.
A bit like yourself, I think, Elaine, perhaps.
I'm not sure about that.
That's why I like to ask the question, because it often reflects people's values in their lives, why they admire someone, and I think Anne is a very fitting person for you. Just before I let you go, just thinking about the Queen, did she have any involvement with Country Women's Association?
She was a member. Well, I never met her. I did see her when she came to Mount Isa in 1970, but I never met her. But when I went over for the international conference, there was a lovely letter from her apologising because she couldn't be there. So that was nice.
What a lovely way to round out that interview. Well, happy 100th, Elaine, and we look forward to seeing lots of news about QCWA or CWA in October when you have your conference here in Toowoomba. So thank you for being my guest on Big Little Small Talk.
Thank you.
That's it for this week. Thanks for joining me on Big Little Small Talk. I hope you can make the time to join me next week. If you've enjoyed this episode, please subscribe on your favourite podcast app.